Okay, first of all, Dave Rat is my hero. I love his videos. One of his videos that he did is like one of my top all-time favorite YouTube videos where he talks about the real world of audio. So this video is not a criticism of him. I'm not claiming that he doesn't know what he's doing in his work as an audio engineer. He knows perfectly well. What I'm this is really about his explanation, which I really feel is an explanation that has been corrupted by marketing nonsense. And I'm not going to get all into that, but I think you'll understand as we go along. So again, I love Dave Rat. It's nothing to do with his understanding, but I feel the way he's explaining it is wrong. And in the comments, I tried to point out how I feel it's wrong, and we went back and forth. He's a really nice guy, but just after a day, he just couldn't take it, so he stopped responding. So, but I still feel he didn't get what I was saying. So I'm going to try again in this video to very specifically lay out exactly how I see things working, and then he can tell me where I'm wrong, or you can tell me where I'm wrong. So, okay, let's go forward. So this is the schematic that fooled us both. And so it's balanced cables explained. It says the source is split into two identical signals. The negative signal is inverted to be fully out of phase from the positive. Well, no, it's not. It's inverted automatically. And then you can see there on the right, here the negative signal is inverted again, which causes phase cancellation to be applied to noises on the positive and negative lines, cleaning the output signal. I don't know who came up with this, but I don't get it. I don't believe it can work while obeying the physical laws as we understand them about energy, electricity, etc., etc. So I believe this is a marketing person came up with this, just like a marketing person at Rode came up with the idea that 32-bit float. You don't need the gain knob, and you don't have clipping anymore. This is the same sort of problem of marketing literature polluting our scientific understanding. And here's another version of that. So on the unbalanced version, right, it shows, okay, it's one line and it has noise in the line. So you get noise in the output. And there's this other line, and somehow, now it looks to me that there's noise in both lines, but somehow it cancels them out. Like how? It doesn't explain exactly. So again, this is another piece of marketing malarkey. So this theory that balanced cables remove noise from a signal by subtracting the good signal from the bad noise, okay. It violates Kirchhoff's voltage law, the corollary of which states no signal in one wire of a circuit can hold voltage or noise, not in the other wire. It doesn't know the difference between noise voltage and regular voltage. How could it possibly? And the reason that his law says that is because he says that the voltages in a circuit, each side will add up to zero essentially. Like that, it's just there's only one voltage. There are no two voltages, or no phases, or anything like that. There's one voltage, and if you take the negative and the positive, you add them up, you get to zero, which, by the way, Dave Rat demonstrates in his video. So a balanced circuit is one which has other circuits designed to remove voltages, noise, before it gets into the circuit with your desired signal. That's what real engineers mean. That diagram is not saying that. It's saying some malarkey about like removing noise from, anyway. There's no such thing as a balanced or unbalanced cable. What we call balanced cables have 3 wires and unbalanced have 2. Again, it's marketing malarkey. What is particularly balanced about a cable? I kept trying to ask Dave Rat this in the comments. Like, you're saying it's balanced. Like, balanced how? Like, what physical property is balanced about it? Like, all wires, it's just copper and some insulation and a little metal housing. That's it in all wires, balanced, unbalanced, or otherwise. There's no difference. There's no magic little material in a balanced cable that's not in an unbalanced cable. So if there's no difference, then how can you call it balanced and unbalanced? No, just call it a 3-wire cable and a 2-wire cable. Rant over on that one. What we mean by a balanced cable is a cable where we can run both a primary signal circuit and a secondary circuit, which is a ground for noise, high power voltages, etc. And balanced circuits were what early telephone engineers aimed at achieving. It does not have one specific physical or technical meaning. So I went back to one of the Bell Labs, books from 1929, so it's almost 100 years ago, and and I cut out a couple of pieces. I went straight to the balanced and unbalanced networks, and right here he says there's a feature of communication circuits which warrants mention at this point because of the confusion which sometimes attends to it. And think about it, 100 years later, and we're still confused. It goes on, this is a general classification of circuits, portions of circuits, or specific apparatus like networks as either balanced or imbalanced. He's not saying, hey, here's you take these two wires and one wire is out of phase. Here's the formula for it, and here are the electronics for it, and this is how you remove noise from this balanced circuit. No, he's saying a general classification of, again, circuits, portions of circuits, and separate apparatus. It's the whole thing. It's a general goal. It's not a specific, again, physics or technology. What is important and about getting a balanced circuit is, he says, that interference or other currents set up between the two wires and ground may enter the balanced circuit and mingle with the currents there. That's the goal, to get those currents out of there. The goal of a balanced circuit, in a sense, a balanced circuit is, I would call it like a clean circuit, like you want a clean circuit. So how they came up with the word balanced and not clean or not shielded or not grounded or whatever, like, I don't know. Like, there's no good word for it. Like, you think about it, right? Because as he said, it's a general thing. It's a whole bunch of things. So whatever. They came up with the word balanced. And then later on, at some point, manufacturers, maybe Canon with the XLR cables, somebody said, oh, we're going to call balanced, like our cables are balanced cables. No, there's no such thing as a balanced cable. You have a balanced circuit, a balanced idea. It's an ideal. It's not a cable. Anyway, once unwanted voltages, noise, gets into your primary circuit, you cannot easily remove it. That was as true in 1929 as it is today. So let's put that theory aside, and I'll explain how I understand microphone circuits, and you can show me the error of my thinking. In the comments, Dave quipped I was fuzzy, so we'll see who is fuzzy, and this is all fun. That's me. Please don't take this all too seriously. Just having fun. Why I like Dave and I totally relate to him is we both have an intense thirst for knowledge, intense curiosity. Like, why would somebody of his experience and success do a video about balanced microphones? Because he too is curious. And that's the thing. I think he too, in the back of his head, is like, something ain't right here. And that's why he did that video. He's like, I'm going to explain it to somebody else, and maybe I'll understand it myself because something's not quite right. And I think I know what that not quite right thing is. And that's what I tried to explain to him in the comments. So, and again, maybe I'm a little wrong about this, but I think in this video, I'm hoping that I am right. And he'll look at this video and he'll be like, got it. Got it. You're right, Max. This is what I was trying to figure out. This is the thing that's been bothering me all these years that never made sense to me. Yes, you're right. that I looked at that schematic and it freaking fooled me and misled me. Okay. So I'm going to start again from the beginning. An electrical circuit is a complete path through which electric current can flow. It consists of three essential components. Something that creates a voltage difference, in our case a magnet with a microphone moving with a coiled wire, a conductive path, usually wires, through which electric current can flow, and a load, which does something with the voltage difference, like an amp that converts electrical energy into moving the magnet in a speaker, or writing memory to a memory card, right? Or whatever we want to do with it. So here's, I put together this little diagram. So here's a person speaking. Now they hit a diaphragm which is attached to a magnet. It moves in the coil. It generates an electric current through the copper wire. It goes into a battery-powered amplifier here, and then goes out to a speaker, which is exactly the same design as the microphone. It's just copper wire with a magnet in between, except the magnet is attached to like a fabric or a cone, right, that acts like a speaker. So, this is what's going on. I'm sure you've seen this diagram before. So, just make it simple. So, sound pressure moves a magnet, creating voltage, and at the other end, the voltage moves a magnet, changing sound pressure. Now, let's just say that there was no speaker at the end. What would happen to that current when you speak into a microphone? It would turn into heat and dissipate, okay? So, that's something to think about. Like, okay, it doesn't just stay in the wire forever. It either turns into heat or you use that energy for something useful, like moving the magnet and creating sound. That's your choice. So in Kirchhoff's law, again, what he says is that both wires at either end are equal, right? If you measure one side of the circuit as positive, the other side will be negative charge of the exact same strength of voltage always. You can't have a different voltage on one end of the wire than the other. So I'm going to use an analogy like a bicycle. So when you measure the chain going in, it will be the same as measuring it out. You can't just like add links to one side and not to or subtract them from another side or anything. All the links are the same. The only, well, I'm getting to that. Okay, so let's imagine that, and again, think of the chain sort of as an electric circuit. So here's the circuit. So Dave on the right could be pushing down on the electrons or pulling up on the electrons. But how would I know on the other side of the wall? I wouldn't. I can't tell whether he's pushing or pulling, because again, because Kirchhoff's law tells me that when I look at this circuit, the voltages on both sides will be equal, right? So we can't think like when he's pushing down, there's going to be more pressure on the wire that's closest to me, right? No, it won't. It'll be the same, direction or speed as the wire underneath it. So if he's pulling, it's going to look the same to me. You just can't see it from the perspective of looking at a circuit. It's all, again, it's the same voltage throughout the whole thing, and we don't know we can't tell whether the person's pushing or pulling it. And anyway, so I only see direction. It doesn't matter from my end, I can't tell. So the incorrect balanced cable theory claims there's a phase on the positive wire that can be isolated in the circuit and removed. So I'm using that with a lightning bolt. But how would I see the lightning bolt on my side of the wall? Because the lightning bolt hitting that one wire will show up in the other wire too. Again, that's Kirchhoff's law. I know it intuitively thinks like, okay, well, if the lightning strikes this one wire, it's going to be unbalanced to the other one. No, they're never unbalanced to the other wire. And I made that in my comments, that when you talk about the word balanced in its very specific physical method, right? You can't have a change on one that isn't, it doesn't show up as a change in the other. So anyway, I couldn't see that. So if the lightning hits one wire on the other side of the wall, let's just say, I'll see it in both wires, Kirchhoff's law. So which wire we call positive or negative is only our observation of voltage direction with both wires equal in that amount of it. And to break things up, let's have a laugh. It ain't positive just because the wire is red. I'm sure Dave Ratt has probably made that joke to many people in his employ. All right, so here's another diagram of what really happens in a balanced circuit. So we have the microphone circuit, which is in the middle, right? And then surrounding it, we have a ground circuit. And the ground circuit is connected to earth. So part of the beginning is connected to the microphone housing, which really is connected to the air and everything around us, right? Everything above the earth. And the other end goes into the ground. And the purpose is that the unwanted static electricity or magnet string voltage on the left, it will go into that ground circuit first because its impedance, it will take it, it's easier for it to take it. There's less resistance to it. So it goes into that and it goes into the ground. If it's not there, it can go into our primary microphone circuit. So the whole idea of a balanced circuit in telephony, and even what we do, is balance is sort of just a name of like we want our balanced circuit just to be clean. We don't want it, we want it balanced against the zero voltage of the ground in a sense. So you can sort of think of like maybe the positive and negative wire, right? They each have a voltage. In the middle is this zero voltage ground thing. So it's balanced around that zero. I don't know how they thought, what at Bell Labs they thought about, they came up with that word balance or how they were thinking, but maybe that's one way of thinking. We just don't know. Anyway, the art of balancing is to get the ground circuit to take everything away over the primary circuit. And here's just another diagram of like a microphone. So in a microphone, like I said, the top steel part of the microphone is in the air. You touch it with your body. It's like everything above earth, right? So any static electricity, let's say in your body, that you generate some electricity, it will go through that cable and go into earth and then come back to the microphone through the air in a sense. It is a circuit too. The ground is a circuit too. So balanced cable in a sense has two circuits. And then the first circuit is pins 1 and 2, and that goes into the amplifier and the speaker, let's just say, right? And then the ground circuit is what I just described. Well, let's just get into the other stuff.
Basically, the green bar represents ground. The red bar will represent pin 2 and the black will represent pin 3. Let's put the input on the bottom. Let's say we have a microphone and there's a coil of wire, and this is attached to one end of the coil of wire. This is attached to the other end of the coil of wire. And this ground is attached to the microphone housing and also around the wires in the cable.
Right, the wires of the cable, but what he's not pointing out, and this is very important, he says it wraps around. I brought that up in my comments. Anyway, so right, this line, this is going to the microphone housing, right? And then what he's not mentioning is that on the other end, it's going to ground, right? So whatever, to earth. And the purpose of this is that, let's just say there's a lightning strike outside his house. So a lightning strike generates a bunch of static electricity that wants to basically, form a current somewhere. That's why it heads, by the way, to Earth, because the Earth is a ground, right? So it wants to head somewhere. So the whole idea of a ground is that when this tries to create a current, it goes into the ground and then it goes away from this circuit. You don't, without this, it would go into this circuit and create a bunch of noise. You don't want the lightning strike crackle to be in your microphone circuit, right? You want to pull it out. The same thing. Let's just say that somebody is, spinning a motor nearby. Somebody's spinning a motor, the magnet's going around and around and around, and it's creating this field, right? That magnetic field, just like the magnet in the microphone, when it can create a current. You don't want that magnet field creating a current in your two mic lines right here, right? That's again why the ground is there. So the ground will, because it has lower impedance, I believe, it's lower impedance, a high impedance, and whatever, it will take that magnetic effect and turn it into electricity in this and not in this. So that's the whole purpose of the ground wire. The ground is a circuit. So when he says that, yeah, it wraps around these other ones, right, and I mentioned that in my comments to him, so I don't know why he didn't get where I was coming from. Anyway.
And when that coil moves back and forth, it creates a voltage and it will increase as the diaphragm moves in and then out. It will send voltage back and forth between pin 2 and pin 3. And the ground stays at 0 volts.
And what I love about this diagram, this thing that he built, is that that's exactly right. See, when this moves, and I did that with my bicycle analogy, if this moves down, this will move up at the exact same amount. You can't affect this without affecting that. That's Kirchhoff's law. So that's why that diagram I showed where you talk about removing noise from these lines is impossible, because you can't put noise in the positive line, say this is a positive line, without it moving the other line. So how are you going to remove it if they both remove the same? It just becomes part of the same current. And then on the ground being 0 volts, I get what he's saying. So for an audio engineer, you want the reference to be 0 volts. And he knows a lot more than this, but I just want to quibble and say one thing, that no, it doesn't always equal 1 volt, because if, again, the lightning strikes outside, this will actually carry a voltage of that line down to earth. So it's not always 0 volts. What he really means is this 0 volts compared to this. Like, this is not taking any of those volts. So it's 0 volts in this, but the voltage isn't here, if that makes any sense.
Now the ground on a balanced line is not really necessary, so we could actually get rid of the ground.
Okay, so this is where he totally lost me when I was watching the video. The ground is not really necessary. So, I mean, again, let's just go into the history. To me, he's working backwards from here, right? He's explaining something by saying, well, we have this equipment set up and we have a ground in this line and we don't really need it. But that, to me, confuses you. You really need to talk from the ground up. So originally, when we had the first thing that we had that would use these types of circuits was a telegraph line. So this line would go to the telegraph operator, right? You have this little thing that you would tap down. And then what they did is they say, okay, well, this would be the positive line. And on this, we're just going to connect it to Earth, essentially, because that'll be the return, that line going to Earth. But when you started with telephones, it's different. You're not like doing click, 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 click. And even when you put into Earth, they had problems where if it was really cold or something, like the impedance would be too high and the circuit couldn't go through. So very quickly on, actually, they realized, no, we can't just go cheap with the telegraph lines and have one line going to each station, and then in that station they just do return to Earth. We're going to need to send two lines. So that was the first thing, right? So okay, in telegraph and telephones, they had this line, right, would go to your telephone, right, your thing, right, and this would be the other line, and then it would terminate. Well, go to the telephone station, whatever. So telephone, whatever. Operator. So, but the problem that they had here, the second problem that they had here is, like I said before, so when they had this system, if lightning struck, that usually wasn't their big problem. The big problem is that generally, when they were setting up the telephones, there are power lines nearby. So they have all these power lines nearby. And as I said, when you have electricity, it can generate a electromagnetic force. And that magnetic force was creating voltage in the other line. So they had to have a way to say, okay, we have these other lines, and then there's crosstalk. You'd have other telephone lines carrying a voltage that might seep over into the other lines through these magnetic forces, right? So that was the problem that they had. So that's why they came up with the ground lines. They said, listen, we need a way to shield ground, to pull any unwanted current or voltage away from our primary circuit, which is the telephone. So for him to say here, oh, well, it doesn't really need the ground, we could take it off, it's going, what I mean, backwards. It's just, I gotta get where he's going. I get what he's trying to say, but, and again, he says in this video, this is my first attempt, and, so anyway, but this is a section where I'm like, Dave, what are you talking about? Like, if you remove this and put over this, why would anybody move it? Why would anyone take the ground wire and connect it to these other wires? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't teach anything. You would never do it. Because if you understand all this, why would you? The whole purpose of the ground wire there is to pull unwanted current or voltage away from your primary circuit. Why the heck would you ever attach it?
See that even with the ground not connected, we still can have a coil generating a balanced line. Now on the other end, on the receiving end of the balanced line circuit, we have a mixing board that takes in polarity and the outer polarity, the equal and opposite voltages, and it reverses polarity in one and sums them together.
Hey, what are you saying here? I mean, maybe you're right. I just can't visualize it. Again, it's sort of like, go back to the bicycle analogy I used. It's sort of like saying that in your, when you go to the back, remember, like the back wheel, right? The wheel that I'm looking at, he's pedaling in the front. I'm in the back, and he's saying that I can go back and take the chain, like the force of the chain pulling, and add it to the force of the chain being pulled. Was it pulling and pushing, right? I could take those and add them up. I mean, no, you can't. You take the energy of one direction of the electrons. You don't combine them. It doesn't make any sense. So what he's saying here, yes, they're different polarities, but they're really, like I said, different ways of looking at the direction of your voltage. You don't, it's a way of looking at it. It's not a physical property of the electrons. It's sort of like this, like you can just imagine being in a wire, right? And you are sitting between two electrons, and somebody talks on the microphone, right? So one electron will hit you and one electron will move away from you, right? I mean, and if they talk the other way, then the one that moved away from you will hit you, and the other one, both the electrons won't hit you from both sides. You'll feel the energy only from one direction. So the mixing board is not taking both directions and summing them up. It's taking the voltage from one direction and using that. It only uses one direction. In fact, that's why we have positive and negative in the first place, so you know which direction the force is coming from, like how your equipment is designed to take that force.
What happens with an unbalanced line? Well, with an unbalanced line, what we do is we combine one of those wires. Let's combine, actually let's do it the other way. Let's combine the black wire, we'll call that pin 3. Oh, and we have a collapse of the unit. We'll combine that wire with, we'll move that over, and we'll combine that wire with the ground. So we're going to short the ground and one of those two together. And this forms our unbalanced circuit. So
Right, but this is what he should have started with. He should have started with, here's my circuit. I have my positive and negative leads coming into it, but somewhere along the line, it's connected to a case, it's going to connect to ground, like not completely. Like we can never completely, totally well, we can isolate a circuit, but like I said, we're still, so when like lightning strikes or magnetic goes near it, in a sense, like we live, and I tried to explain this to him in the comments, we live in a world of electromagnetic radiation and whatever. And we live in a giant circuit. Every day we walk, static electricity, when we rub our coat or something like that, that's part of where we're creating a current into ground. So this is the way it is, so that there's never truly, no circuit is truly independent on its own. So this is where you should start. Say, listen, no circuit is truly dependent on its own. So in a sense, even if we have a circuit, we also have the Earth circuit, the universal circuit, whatever, like that, the atmospheric stuff, lightning, magnetism, whatever, that's coming into our circuit. And we can just think of this as another line, the ground line, which he's showing here.
Unbalanced circuit, that coil is generating electricity, the coil in the microphone, or whatever signal is being sent. And since this is a ground now, and I'm also using these mic stand and clip, holding on to this to represent the ground. It's grounded, it doesn't move, it's a 0 volts.
No, well, I don't know. I mean, you'll have to tell me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that's correct. I mean, again, if your circuit, your microphone circuit is always going to be susceptible to outside magnetism, static electricity, voltages, whatever. So it's always part of this sort of outside circuit. So to say it's 0 volts, no, what you really mean is that when something is grounded, it's all going to go to 0 volts because the Earth has an unlimited number of electrons. So many electrons that no matter what kind of, lightning or anything you put into it, it will gobble them all up and reach 0 volts. So if you have that wire, right, and it puts this voltage into the ground wire and it goes into the ground, and then you go 2 feet from the ground with your voltmeter and said, oh, well, what's the return voltage? There is no return voltage because it's, there's so many electrons in the Earth that you'll never register. I mean, theoretically, in a sense, I think, yes, when lightning strikes the Earth, somewhere in the Earth, you should be able to read it. I think theoretically, but anyway, I'm now definitely outside my comfort zone, but or my knowledge. But anyway, yeah. So I think what he's saying here again, the 0 volts, I feel is he needs to explain that.
0 volts. So now what happens is when the voltage is sent, just the one wire moves in relation. So there's an unbalanced signal. And
yes and no. I mean, no, if you want your circuit to behave like Kirchhoff's, voltage law, which basically says around a node, the voltage will be equal on each side of the wire. So no, as far as the microphone circuit is concerned, you cannot have one end, like the red end, moving without and the other end moving. So what he's sort of really saying here is what I was saying before, is that because the Earth has an unlimited number of electrons and you drive a current into it, it just goes into that, it just disappears into that ground. It's no longer a circuit. That's really what he's showing here. Like I said, so it can't exist as a circuit because a circuit, according to Kirchhoff's law, both sides have to be equal. So if you have one side with a voltage and no side on the other voltage, you actually don't have a circuit, or you have, I guess, the Earth circuit. I mean, I don't really know how to explain this. So this is something, again, he would need to explain for me to understand because I don't quite get it.
Signal and the, as we saw before, the balance signal. So we can look over at the scope and I can unbalance the signals that we have here. So I can take and short. So now I've shorted this pin to ground and we saw the yellow one get bigger and the output stays about the same. So we can try that. And there's it shorted. That's an unbalanced signal where we double the size of the yellow versus the two smaller signals that are out of polarity and added together. And we get the output there. So that's what's represented with the unbalanced signal.
So I don't know what's going on here. I mean, again, I think, that he's using this balanced and unbalanced terminology in the way that I explained with that chart, which is wrong. All circuits are have to be equal on both sides. So what do you mean by balanced and unbalanced? Like I said, I feel like in the history of electricity or telephones and microphones and stuff like that, balanced basically just means that you have one circuit that is balanced against 0 volts, which isn't always 0 volts. It might be a little bit volts, but in a sense it's 0 volts because it gobbles it up immediately. So really what it's saying is like, okay, everything's going to Earth except the signal, the voltage that I want. And so a balanced circuit, I believe, when they're talking about telephony back in the 1930s with Bell Labs, they're talking about, a circuit where, my circuit is not, only has the voltages that I want. So I just don't understand what he's saying here. Again, I think the way he's thinking about balanced and unbalanced is I'm sorry to say, is incorrect.
Go back to the balance line. Both of those work very similarly in actual function. The balance line requires a little bit of extra electronics on the front end of the mixing board. One of the advantages of a balance line is if a signal is induced onto both of these, like I was to move the mic stand while this is going here, and this is still moving up and down. If I move the mic stand, if I create and if this was held still, the ground didn't move, that would create a signal that's on both this red and black wire.
No. I don't think it is, because the whole purpose of the ground wire is to pull voltages away from that circuit. So I'm sorry, Dave, you just need to explain this to me. I mean, I just do not get it. I'm sorry.
Well, just like we saw here, when we have two signals that are opposite and they've been subtractive, and the input mic pre's of our consoles are subtractive and they create that doubling, well, I can actually go and show you what happens if the same signal is on both of them. And here we can see that, I'll turn this down. The red line is the output when I have an additive signal. I basically added the two signals together instead of subtracted them. And because they're equal and opposite, when we add them together, we get nothing.
Right. He's proving Kirchhoff's law. That's Kirchhoff's law right there, that both signals in a circuit around a node will equal. And so, but, it's... So anyway, I mean, yes, that's correct. But if you think about it, what does it say? It doesn't say anything. I mean, it does say a lot. It's interesting. Anyway, he's proving Kirchhoff's law right there, but it has nothing to do with removing noise from a microphone line. I can't see it at any rate.
Adds together anything that's the opposite and cancels out anything that's the same, therefore giving us a noise reduction system. All right, hope that.
No, it doesn't. I don't see how it works that way. Sorry.
Makes sense. There's something to do. I've been trying to envision in my head, how can I demonstrate how a balance line works?
So yeah, he did. Again, I want to say a million times, Dave knows, way more about balancing lines in practice than I will ever know. Like in the actual doing of the work. So my problems aren't with that. I understand that. It's my problems with the way he's explaining it. He's explaining it using the equipment and the way manufacturers talk about it, and not about how physicists and the early pioneers of electronics talked about. And he's totally into the history stuff. Totally. So again, again, like I said, that chart where they talk about the subtractive this and that, this is all from the manufacturers, and this is all freaking BS. There's no circuitry in that stupid preamp in your consoles or whatever that removes noise because they have, quote, balanced lines plugged into them. No, 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 no. There are two circuits, and one circuit pulls away the unwanted voltages and leaves the other voltage intact. There's no real actual magic to this that I know about. Now, sure, if you're sending an AC current over the lines, it's a different story. If you have amplification over the line, that's a different story. But if you're just talking about a microphone into an XLR cable, and again, XLR cable, it's confused as a matter. If you plugged into, if you're going two wires into your amplifier, into your mixing console, whatever, then it is susceptible to interference from lightning, from magnetism, static electricity, whatever. If there's a third line, which actually forms a fourth circuit, a second circuit, that can pull it away, then you will get less. And that's how they do it. There's no rocket science here. There's no such thing as balanced cables or unbalanced cables. There are only cables with 3 wires and cables with 2 wires. And the ones with 3 wires actually, in a sense, theoretically have 4 wires, because the other wire of the ground wire is the earth wire, in a sense, right? That's the return wire. So anyway, again, I love David Ratt. He's done some of the greatest videos. I love what he's doing. But in this specific description of physically what's going on, good, we've both been fooled and suckered by this thing, I think. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong here. I understand. And I'm ready to eat my hat and eat crow when he points out everything I did wrong. But this is my understanding as of today.